So my name is Lisa Guernsey, and I work at New America, which is, I'm in an office in Washington, D.C., but we have folks working across the country. And if you haven't heard about New America, there is a New America, California office. Our New America office in D.C. is where our early and elementary education policy team is located. But we have been working in California, reporting on the ground on early education for about 5 years. And Sarah Jackson, Sarah, do you mind just waving and introducing yourself? The Sarah Jackson, who's a journalist, but also one of our analysts and reporters with us at New America, has been doing a lot of reporting on the ground. So you'll hear a little bit about that, and some of the people up here she's interviewed for her work. So before we get started, I'm going to do in our wonderful panel discussion and some of the introductions I'll make in a moment, I want to just do a little bit of framing about why this is such a critical time to be talking about the issues of quality in early education, and also kind of introducing you to some of the materials that you will be receiving today so that you can take them forth and really do some good work with them. So many of you may already have these now at your tables. I just want to quickly note a couple of things that you'll be looking through, will be referring to today. Certainly the Getting Down to Facts report is key to this entire PACE conference. And so the research brief that you have now is the one on early childhood education in California. And Deborah Stipek at Stanford University, who I'll be introducing in a moment, will be talking more about that. There's a report here on fostering pre-K to elementary alignment, and we're going to talk about what that is and why that's so critical. We have our report from New America on the 3 communities that we've been studying: Fresno, San Jose, a school district in San Jose, Franklin McKinley, and Oakland. And so these are some of the lessons learned all together in this report, but we also have a series of new profiles out with some data points from each of those districts. So that's what these materials are, and hopefully that can be helpful to you as you're thinking about what's happening in your own district, or how you may want to kind of compare and contrast what you're doing in districts, if that's where you're coming from. And then lastly, a really important piece to this whole quality conversation is a new report that the Learning Policy Institute just released yesterday, am I right, yesterday? Called Untangling the Evidence on Preschool Effectiveness, Insights for Policymakers, which what's wonderful about it is that it's really readable and really quite short when you think about all of the academic research that's been done on this issue, which I can tell you, having looked at this for over a decade, is piles and piles and piles big in terms of how much research there is out there. But this piece takes you through it in a really easy to read fashion. So that's what you have in front of you. But we're going to help to make sense of all of that. We're going to dig into some real world examples, and I kind of really hope that you can kind of take away some things to really get done by the end of this session. So first of all, why are we even talking about quality teaching in pre-K classrooms? Beth and Deborah are going to bring in some of that as we get into the panel. But I first just want to say a thanks and a shout out to PACE for recognizing the importance of this so early on and including it as one of the 6 pillars of what it's going to take to really improve education in California. I have been looking at early education research for many years, first as a science reporter, an education and science reporter. And I probably don't need to tell you that what we know from the science, but it is incredibly clear how much the early years of a child's life set them up for success, not only in school and in their academics, but also just giving them the grit, the skills of perseverance, a number of different social and emotional skills that they need to be able to be successful in life. So that will be a key part of what we're talking about when it comes to quality as well. So last couple things before we get started here. I want to say a thanks to the Learning Policy Institute for partnering with us on this event. But also last night we held a forum here. Many of you might have been at that event. Actually, if anybody was at the early childhood policy forum last night, can you raise your hand? Great, okay, so good, like 6 or 7 of you were there. And LPI was a fantastic partner with us on that, so thank you. Okay, so before I get to our introductions, we want to find out a little bit more about all of you. So this is where we get to kind of not move around like suddenly do jumping jacks, but I was thinking that instead of simply like meagerly like putting your hand up, have you actually stand up from your seats. I just want to find out who's in the room. So first, if you are an educator or someone who's working every day with students or young children, can you stand up? Gotcha, great. If you are a leader or principal, essentially a center director or a principal of a school, so one particular building, and you're here, can you stand up? Also, excellent, okay. Can I just ask, are you a principal or teacher or both? Principal of an elementary school? Oh, excellent, okay, welcome. So you can add to our Fresno conversation, because we're going to be having a lot of good conversation about Fresno. If you are someone who works in a district office, in the superintendent's office, say a director of curriculum and instruction, somebody who's at that level at the district, can you stand up? Anybody standing up? Someone's not wanting to stand up, but they want to raise their hands. Awesome, okay, fantastic. If you are an advocate working kind of whether it's in children's welfare issues or education issues, can you stand up? Okay, great. Thank you all very much. If you are someone who works in the world of research, who is looking at just impact and studying outcomes, and who's here, can you stand up? Okay, great. Welcome. And then lastly, and I probably have forgotten some group, but I was thinking if you're someone who's working at the policy level, so perhaps it's in the California Department of Education or in the superintendent's office, or at the district level in a policy capacity, stand up. Great. Okay. So what I'm seeing is, and this is really actually very exciting for our conversation today, that there is a lot of diversity in various roles for many of you here, and yet what we'll see is how connected all of these pieces are and how important it is for everyone in these roles to kind of understand some of the components that will make up quality. So that's fantastic. Am I forgetting anybody? Is there anybody who wasn't really named?
School board members.
School board members, excellent. Oh my gosh, that's, yeah. That local piece is really key too. Any other school board members? No, okay. County office.
County offices of
Great.
education, yeah.
How many of you are here from county offices?
There we
Oh,
go.
of course. See, I knew I was missing something. Okay. Well, fantastic. So, well, thank you all for being here, and so we will dive in now. Let me introduce our panelists. So it's you guys are in for a real treat. We've had some conversations across this panel already about the various things that we can be talking about, and everyone in front of you here has just really deep experience on kind of some different in different slices of what this question of quality means. So we are very fortunate to have Deborah Stipek with us today, who is a professor at Stanford, but who is also, I've been reading Deborah's work for years, not only on the questions of how much the workforce matters to quality programming in pre-K and quality classroom teaching, but also issues of subject matter. So everything from what early math and early literacy look like to developmentally appropriate practice in classroom. So Deborah, thank you for joining us. Beth Malloy is here from the Learning Policy Institute. And Beth and her colleague Hannah and many others at LPI as well have been really focused in on what the key ingredients are for quality, understanding it from a comprehensive perspective. Beth also has the rich experience, and you could also say maybe it's a kind of sometimes painful experience of having worked in Washington, D.C. at our federal level in the Office of Head Start and through SRCD fellowships, has been connected to a lot of the policy agencies in Washington, D.C. We're very fortunate to have Vicki Ramos-Harris with us, from the Advancement Project, who will be able to bring in a lot of the questions of equity and understanding the differences in our populations, particularly when it comes to language and linguistic diversity, among many other things. And then Ana Arambula is also with us from Fresno Unified, and she'll be talking about a lot of the professional development issues that are going to come up when it comes to quality. All right. So let's move in to some of our, what we're going to do is, instead of having everybody kind of have a presentation to give, we really do want this to be as conversational as possible. So we're going to start with me as asking some questions of our panelists. I'm actually going to sit down to do this so that we can have a conversation across the table. And each one will speak for just a couple of minutes, maybe as many as 5 minutes to answer that particular question, and then we'll go on to another one. And then at the end, we're going to have some moments for all of you to kind of digest that information at your tables. We'll share that out. We'll talk a little bit more about the resources that are available. So I'm going to start, Beth, with you. And we're going to try to just really unpack what it is that we mean by quality, but more than that, why does it matter? Why can't we just simply say, let's have TK or pre-K in our school districts and just leave it at that?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. It's a critically important question, and I thought that I would start by just taking a slight step back and explaining why it is, although I'm assuming by the fact that you're in this room, I may be a little bit preaching to the choir in terms of why it is that preschool is so important. So one of the, the Learning Policy Institute did just release yesterday a new report. It's not necessarily groundbreaking research, but it's an attempt to really communicate what we do know about the importance of preschool, which is that preschool, early education in general, the early years of life, from birth to 5, really birth to 8, are so critically important for laying the foundation for learning. And we find that when you invest in preschool, but particularly high quality preschool programs, children come to school more prepared. We're at a point in California, I think, where the data have made it quite clear that our K-12 school system has a mammoth task put at its feet, because children arrive in kindergarten with substantial gaps in terms of what they've learned so far and what sort of the foundation for their learning really looks like. And so trying to help children catch up at that point is really quite a heavy lift. But we do know that if we invest earlier, and we invest in high quality, then we can really start to close those gaps earlier, so that children are starting on a more equal footing, and you can really focus on their growth and learning from there. So our report finds, in general, preschool programs do prepare children for school. We find really across the board that you see impacts at kindergarten entry from preschool programs. You may have heard of this phenomenon that we call fade out, which is this idea that even though children come to school more prepared if they've had preschool, you look at 3rd grade, maybe 5th grade, sometimes 1st grade, and you don't see that those benefits in terms of what you're measuring around, let's say, state achievement tests, have persisted. So what we did is we unpacked that, and we unpacked in particular 2 studies that have really been popularized as counterpoints to the assertion that preschool is an effective and worthy investment for young children. And those are the Head Start Impact Study and the Tennessee Voluntary Pre-K Program. And really what we find is that in some ways it's right. Just attending preschool is not enough. We need to invest in high quality preschool programs. And I'm going to talk about what we mean, promise. We need to invest in high quality preschool programs. And we also need to really think strategically about what other early learning programs are available to children, as well as what the quality of the early elementary instruction looks like. Because if we see from the research that kids show up to kindergarten more prepared, it's reasonable to say that there's something going on. There's some misalignment. There's some break between that preschool experience and what's happening in kindergarten and 1st grade and 2nd grade that maybe isn't taking advantage of the gains that those children are bringing into the classroom. So that's why we're talking today both about why preschool quality is so important, but also how we align our approaches to quality instruction and to professional development of educators across the early years, so from P through 3. And when we say quality, what we really mean is, what does the classroom experience in preschool look like for children? We know actually, with adult learning, we talk about it all the time, and we know absolutely in early childhood, human beings learn by doing. They learn by experimenting, by exploring, by interacting with other people, and this is really especially true with young children. And so that doesn't mean that children can't learn specific content, that we can't scaffold their learning in mathematics, in literacy. But we need to equip early educators with the ability to embed that learning, that instruction, in everyday routines and play, such that children are exploring and doing, but they're also being scaffolded to really advance in their own trajectories on particular content domains. And so I'll just say that because that work is so incredibly complex, when we talk about quality in preschool, we really are, one of the fundamental levers that we need to address is the quality of the early learning workforce. And that comes down to a couple of things. And I know that Deborah's going to talk to you about sort of some statistics that may surprise you around where we actually are in terms of the quality. But I'll just say that those levers are, the pre-service preparation for early educators, the in-service training and supports that they're getting to improve and refine their instruction, and then the quality of the job that they have to do. So that comes down to their salary, their benefits, and really the climate of the professional environment. So I'm going over on time, and I'm going to pass over.
Well, actually, that's perfect, because so what I was going to ask you, Deb, is what is the state of those issues in California? And so Beth's set us up to kind of think about all those different components of just even our workforce. But if you can walk us through a little bit about what did you find when you were pulling together the early childhood pieces for getting down to FACS 2, and I mean, I think you're going to point out that there are really some gaps that need to be filled on this, but yeah, talk us through that.
Well, thank you for the perfect setup. I'm going to focus on the workforce because it's all about the teacher. It's all about the person who's interacting directly with children. There are many policies that influence the quality of the teaching that goes on, the quality of those interactions. So I'll back up and talk about some of those policies. I do want to say just at the outset that I'm delighted to be talking to people from K-12, not just from early childhood, because this is an issue that transcends the early childhood field, and I typically just have early childhood audiences, so thank you for indulging us. Those of you who are focused primarily on pre-K. I want also to just reinforce a point that Beth made, which is if we want to have sustained benefits from pre-K, whatever the quality is, we really have to take advantage of those benefits when children move into kindergarten and first grade. And some national studies have shown that across the country, the teaching in kindergarten typically overlaps substantially with the skills that children have already mastered. And in a number of studies that I saw, when they looked at the skills in classrooms and the material that teachers covered, there was no relationship between the children's skills and what teachers were covering. So teachers were teaching a curriculum, not fully aware of what skills children have and not building on those skills. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to repeat pre-K and kindergarten, we're not really benefiting from high quality kindergarten. So it really goes to the importance of kindergarten teachers, and this is true for teachers of every grade, really knowing where their children are on those learning trajectories and then organizing the teaching around building on where they are and helping each of them get to the next step. The preparation for teachers is obviously an important part of the picture of the quality of teaching. And in California, it's hugely variable, for one thing. It is relatively low compared to other states, and there is not a focus on practice. So the majority of states now require a bachelor's degree, and often the debate about teacher preparation for preschool is around the BA or not. I think it misses an important point, which is that it's the content that's really important. A BA, I have said this many times, a BA in sociology and 24 units of teacher preparation is 24 units of teacher preparation. And so what's really important is that people are learning how to be teachers, just like we care about for K-12 teachers. In most states that require a BA, the preparation program is a teaching credential. It might be pre-K through third grade, it might be 0 to 8, there's every possible combination, I think, but they are teacher preparation programs focused on practice. California, the most rigorous requirements are 24 units of child development, and analyses of what those 24 units look like show that they focus much more on foundations, theory, and that sort of thing. And we heard yesterday evening from a teacher who talked about how she'd gone through her preparation program and walked into her first class and basically said, yikes, what do I do? Because it doesn't necessarily prepare you to manage real children or to teach them basic literacy skills or to help their language development, as we're going to, I assume, talk about in a few moments. So I think we get lost in the BA versus not BA conversation about what should people be prepared to be able to do when they become teachers. So in California, we need to do a lot of work on the rigor of the expectations and the requirements for teachers. We also need to do a lot of work and invest in higher education, because right now we could say, okay, all preschool teachers should be able to do X, Y, and Z when they leave their preparation programs. But preparation programs are not prepared to be able to teach those particular skills. I'm going to give you a 30-second history lesson for those of you who haven't been steeped in the field of early childhood. There's been a lot of resistance in the field of early childhood to anything that's teaching. In fact, I often, when I talk to early childhood educators, I talk about providing learning opportunities. Because when I say the word teaching, they immediately think of flashcards and worksheets. And that's not the kind of teaching that Beth was describing, which is active learning, engaging, playful, and so on. That takes a lot of skill. But higher ed has been, for the most part, in the kind of what I refer to as the old school view that teaching is bad for kids. It's not that teaching is bad for kids, it's the kind of teaching you do. And there's bad teaching and there's good teaching. And good teaching is more guiding children, providing opportunities that are planned, intentional, and playful. And believe me, it is not easy. It takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation. So we're going to have to build our higher ed programs, invest in them to be able to develop the kinds of courses and even the faculty who can teach courses that prepare people for practice. And we're going to have practice teaching. I think one of the things we know from K-12 is that the practice teaching is one of the most important parts of training. Beth mentioned that human beings learn by doing. Well, so do adults, not just kids. Learning how to teach by sitting in a classroom and reading chapters and listening to lectures, it's a start. I don't want to say it's not necessary because I am from higher ed, but on the other hand, it's just a start. I just want to mention that if we make our requirements more rigorous, which I believe we need to, we do have to address the issue of pay. we have a shortage of people going into early childhood education right now, a really serious shortage. So if we require more, we're just going to exacerbate that shortage, and will drive a lot of good people out of the field. So you can't demand, certainly not BA level preparation, and then pay them a poverty wage. So one of the, I want to say my favorite, but it's not really my favorite. One of the most startling pieces of data that I ran across while I was working on the Getting Down to Facts report was that 58% of our childcare providers were receiving public assistance in California. That's just not okay. It's not okay from a humanitarian perspective. It's not okay from supporting young children's development, because people who are worried about getting food on their tables and paying the rent for their own families are not going to be in the best position to provide loving, caring, nurturing care for young children. So there are many pieces to the puzzle of increasing the quality of teaching, and unfortunately we have to really address all of them at the same time, because if one of them without the other could actually do more harm than good.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think, and we'll get back to some of those you've named three kind of components there. I just want to kind of maybe say them again. These are things that I know at New America on our early and elementary ed team we focus on as well. It's professional development and learning opportunities for the teachers. It's improving higher ed, and it's improving compensation. And it's a three-legged stool. And all three of those pieces will be key.
There's a fourth leg, which I just didn't get into because my time was out. But there's also supporting teachers once they're on the job.
Yes,
and,
yes.
And we have QRIS in California. It needs a lot of work. It needs a lot more investment. I could go into a lot more detail on QRIS if people want to later, but anyone who starts a job knows that whatever your training, you still need support and ongoing coaching to be able to be effective at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think under the professional learning heading, there's in-service and pre-service and all these different pieces. So fantastic. Let me go to you, Vicki, so that we can start talking about how we can go from a place in California where we have the disparities that Deb has laid out and the real challenges that we're facing here in the state, to actually supporting more and more quality classrooms. And tell us a little bit about what you see about the population and the variability of the population in California as well.
Absolutely, thank you. So when we think about the context that Deborah and Beth set up, we also really need to think about the particular California context that we're in and looking at the children that we serve. California is incredibly diverse, and we have riches in language. And so we really need to bring our diversity of culture and language to the forefront of our design and our systems change in order to make sure that it actually responds to and supports the very kids that we're serving. So California's young child population is vastly children of color. 52% are Latino, 5% are Black, 11% Asian, 26% non-Hispanic white. California is also home to the largest population of children learning English in addition to their home language, what we refer to as dual language learners in early childhood and English learners in K-12. So when we look at the early childhood population, 60% of our children 0 to 5 are dual language learners. And when we think about the languages, the California Department of Education keeps track of about 65 languages in the state. We know we have far more than that, but that's what we keep data on. 94% of the students of our our English learners speak the top 10 languages, and 82% speak Spanish. So we have a lot of great languages, and we also know that a lot of the focus can be on Spanish development, and then thinking about spaces like super diverse classrooms that have multiple languages and things like that. I just want to point out that the data in terms of languages comes from K-12 because we don't keep track of that data in California in early childhood. and we don't keep track of a lot of data in early childhood, which is something that Deborah points out in the Getting Down to Facts report. So given that dual language learners is such a big part of our population, I want to just do a brief overview of what's a little bit of background on this issue. So we have a consensus study that was released in 2017 by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And they verify what we've known for a long time, but it's great to have that verified by science, right? So we know now for sure that children are wired to learn any language in the world, that they are capable of learning multiple languages, and that the earliest years, just like early childhood, is a critical period for learning language. We know that language is interconnected, so the home language is central to English development and overall academic achievement, so we should be very concerned about language loss, and we should be thinking about how to preserve home language. We know that quality and quantity matter in terms of the caliber of quality conversations which families can have at home. And so we need families to stop thinking that they need to give up their home language to help their kids. We actually need them to know that the home language is the language of love. It's the language that connects them to families. It's part of what helps them identify their child identity, their social and emotional connections, and supports all the powerful connections that we know in early childhood are critical to learning and growing. So we also know in terms of bilingualism that it causes flexibility in the brain that has stronger cognitive abilities. So there's a lot of good that our bilingual brains offer, and so we should be building on those skills. I want to share a quick story. I promise it's short. Going back to the child identity and being able to thrive, there was a teacher. You probably know that Proposition 58 passed in 2016, which creates more opportunities for bilingual education. And after that, there were a lot of bilingual teachers who've been talking about, yay, we can not kind of hide our passion for this anymore. And so I've been hearing a lot of stories about what it was like to grow up without being able to be their full selves in the classroom. My mother has her own story, but this teacher talked about how she remembers early memories of dinners at the table with her family. They would have rich conversations. It's what they looked forward to every day. Everybody had a voice. Everybody went around the room and talked about their day. And then one day, the teacher said to the parents, please talk to your kids in English. They really need that for their learning. And so they did. And then they started struggling at school, at home, to talk to their families. Conversations were no longer rich. And that's the first time that she started to think maybe her parents weren't so smart. So that is a really powerful, what we do in the classroom, how we validate who children are, how we uplift their language, and you don't have to be bilingual to do that. There are plenty of strategies and knowing the pedagogy and knowing what to do to support the development of home language and the culturally responsive practice that really help children thrive and learn. So I know I'm running out of time, but I do want to say that we really need to make sure this is embedded in how we define quality, how we be intentional about integrating it in our quality rating and improvement system, in our workforce development, primary language assessments, as well as English assessments, so we can see the child's growth in any way that he or she can convey that. And the instruction in higher ed and the way that we're doing licensing and those kinds of things, that really needs to be brought in. There are some great policies that the Head Start Performance Centers has offered in this very area that we could really bring to California. So I often say that California is uniquely positioned to lead the nation on the education of dual language learners, and I would say communities of color as well. We are in a pivotal moment that we have the research on our side to know what our kids need in language and culture. We have the political will after the passage of Proposition 58, with 3/4 of the voters passing this. It passed in every single county. Marijuana didn't do that. So we have the public support. We have the support of assets-based policies that have been passed since then, the English Learner Roadmap that includes English early childhood education. And we also have a governor and a new state superintendent who cares about early childhood and we know can be very helpful, but we need to make sure that we're bringing all these things together so that we can build and design a system that really works and reflects our kids.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. So, and thank you for that cautionary tale. That is pretty powerful, and I think, really quite upsetting when you think about years and years of teachers and parents kind of feeling they had to swallow or hold back on their home language. So as you're at your tables are just kind of trying to think about how these messages might be put in, these new, more positive messages of what quality looks like might be put in place in your districts or in your counties. Take a moment to just think about, are the right messages being sent about how important home language is and how to support that. So just wanted to put that out there. Now we can turn to Anna, who has some really interesting experiences to describe in her work at Fresno Unified. And so Anna, you'll be able to help us build on this question of how these quality interactions or these important adult-child interactions are really at the heart of quality in a preschool classroom. We need to make sure that we're recognizing the power of language and linguistic diversity in that. How do we ensure that our teachers then have what it takes to bring these messages forth in their classrooms?
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about this innovative project that is taking place in Fresno. So it's called the Fresno Language Project, and it's funded by the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, and it's a 10-year initiative. So the goal of this project is to improve professional development and training for early educators to better support the needs of our dual language learners. And as Vicki was just sharing all the important background information, I'm just gonna be talking a little bit about this collaborative and how important it is to provide these teachers who are working with our young children and talking about quality and what does that look like through professional development and that ongoing coaching. So I am the coach for the Fresno Language Project, and so we are implementing, we're going on our 5th year, implementing innovative, concrete approaches to supporting young dual language learners, not only in their home language, but also the English language, because we don't want a child to lose the home language and not pick up the English or vice versa. So we are focusing on helping children have a strong foundation in both the English and their home language. So we are implementing innovative practices that were created by experts in the early education field, like Dr. Linda Espinosa, Dr. Carola Matora, Oliva Olsen, and Elizabeth Magruder. So these are concrete approaches that our teachers, we have 79 teachers that are part of this project. And not only are the teachers part of this project, but we have our executive directors. We have our site supervisors and administrators. We have our teachers and teacher assistants and myself being part of this professional development training that take place 5 times a year on Saturdays for 3 hours. And so we are learning concrete strategies on how teachers can support the value of linguistic and cultural diversity with the children in their classroom and their parents. The family engagement, which is one of the key points, to supporting our young children, because parents are their child's first teacher, and we're there to support them. Talking about the POLE strategies, which are personalized oral language learning strategies, which are the concrete strategies that all of our teachers who are part of this Fresno Language Project are implementing in their classrooms. And it's not something new that teachers are doing. These POLE strategies are beautifully embedded with any curriculum that our teachers are using in the early ages of development with their children. And most importantly, the support for their home language. We are learning about the importance of supporting the home language. There's a lot of research out there that points that, being bilingual has great outcomes. And so that's where we are at in Fresno. And we have multiple agencies who are part of this project. We have Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. We have Children's Services Network, which is our local R&R agency. We have Fresno EOC Early Head Start and Head Start, and of course Fresno Unified. So together there are 19 learning settings that come together. And so my role as a coach is to, again, be there at the professional development trainings, but then go back and do observations in these classrooms of these teachers who are part of this project and meet with them one-on-one to talk about their growth and where do they want to go as far as supporting the young children in their classroom in both the English language and their home language. So these are concrete strategies that our teachers have been using. We're going on our 5th year in this project. And to see the growth and with them themselves through this professional development training has been so heartwarming. I mean, I have tons of stories that I can share, but I know because of time, I won't be able to. But one of the highlights that I want to point out, and being a previous teacher myself in administration, is one thing that the teachers really appreciate is everybody being together in the same room, learning alongside each other. A lot of the times we send our teachers to these great trainings and they come back very energized and they talk to us about, you know, that they shared this, but then we can't do it because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Here we're all together learning with our administrators at the table, collaborating and envisioning what this looks like in our learning setting, because there's not one size fits all. It's all they're all different and unique. We have programs that are at sites, school sites. We have in-home providers, you know, so it's not just the teachers who are based out of a school campus or a different environment. We have in-home providers too who are part of this project, and to see their growth through this professional development training, I mean, the stories that they share are just phenomenal. But just to highlight one of the things, one of the teachers in the project said, you know, one of the things that I appreciate the most from this project, and she's been in the project since year one, she said the fact that we have the ongoing professional development training and the coaching that comes along with it. Because we go to these great trainings, but then we come back and we have a ton of questions, but who do we ask? And so having their leaders, their administrators in the same learning setting when we have a professional development sessions, and myself, allow them to implement those concrete strategies that they are learning and that they can take back to their classroom using a coaching strength-based approach, where they are the ones that set the goals on where do they want to go to further support the young children in their classrooms.
So, yeah, and there's so much to unpack in what you've just described there. So maybe, and this is something maybe we can just bring in some conversation across the table. So there's just the point that it's not just a one-off professional development, you go off for a Saturday and you come back and you don't use it in any real way. There's the fact that you mentioned that principals, is it that there are administrators with you in this?
There is. So we have our executive director, Deanna Matthews, who's our director at our early learning department. We have the director from Children's Services Network. We have our director from Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, who's there. We have our program director from Early Head Start and Head Start also there at the table, learning together with their teachers, who are the ones that are serving our young children and our families, having those daily interactions with them. Their site supervisors are there, the teachers and the teacher assistants, because a lot of the times I feel like we forget about the assistants in the classroom and we focus so much on the teachers. But the bottom line is, if you really want quality, they all have to come together.
So let me ask, for those of you who are looking at some of the policies and making the really good point about sustaining the gains, not just at the pre-K grade or the pre-K year, but then what does kindergarten look like, what does first grade look like? Having all of those leaders as part of it seems key. Do you guys want to just bring in anything from your own research on what it means to have those kinds of leaders at the table?
I just want to mention one study that we did actually in Fresno, and comparing it to other districts. One of the things that's happening is a lot of pre-Ks now are part of the elementary schools. And what principals tell us across the state is that they feel really unprepared to be able to take on the pre-K. And what happens often is that instead of creating greater coherence with the elementary school, it becomes kind of the stepchild who doesn't get very much attention because the leadership is not really prepared to provide the kind of support and training that's required. So they don't have a director, so they don't have anybody advocating for them. What Fresno has done is create an institute for the elementary school principals, Fresno Unified, to provide them with training in early childhood education. Many of the principals told us that as they visit the early childhood programs with people from the district office, again, really bringing those leaders together, that they've learned things that they are then working with their kindergarten and first grade teachers to bring into them, greater attention to self-regulation, social emotional development, and playful learning, and so on. So we often forget about the importance of leadership, but I'm so glad to hear that that's part of the larger picture that you're working with.
Yes.
So I think one thing that I might highlight from what you said is kind of twofold. So it's this idea of needing to be together in the same space, And that's so important across sort of the tiers of leadership within early learning, but it's also critically important for educators across preschool and kindergarten and first grade. I don't know whether or not it stood out to you, but one of the things that's true about this professional learning experience, which seems is so high quality and people are so excited about, it's on Saturdays for 3 hours. It's on their own time, and it may or may not be, but in large part, for early educators in particular, professional learning is always on their own time and it's on their own dime. And so what we hear is that it's incredibly difficult and frustrating for our kindergarten and first grade and second grade educators to try and get in the same space with early learning educators, because they do have the supports for professional learning that early educators don't. And so it's just something to keep in mind, to understand that many of our preschool teachers are bringing to the table a different set of stressors and parameters and constraints, and hopefully we can address some of those constraints. One of the things that we can really do to help improve quality is fix that, right? Not ask early educators to go about improving their practice on their own time and without any financial supports. But we also, in the interim, one of the things we can keep in mind is that there are different constraints on this population in particular, and try and strategize about how to bring those folks together.
I will just add, we don't expect K-12 teachers that their primary professional development happens on the weekends. We don't expect that to be after school. But we do expect that of our early childhood field, and that really needs to change, as Beth was pointing out. The other thing in terms of the articulation, right, is this notion of rigor. What does rigor look like? And then that and developmentally appropriate settings. There's a principal who went to go visit a transitional kindergarten classroom a few years ago, and he brought in a researcher, and they went into the classroom, and he said, he saw the kids playing, and he said, well, tell me when I should come back when the learning starts. And the teacher was like, the learning is happening now. And so it was really clear that he just really had no idea about child development. So if principals are supposed to be instructional leaders, how can they guide the early childhood educators if they don't have that background? And so one example is San Francisco for a while created a cohort of principals at elementary school campuses who they brought together to give them the background in child development. And so it was a little bit kind of voluntary at first, and then peer-to-peer, they realized, hey, this is a good thing. And it grew. And principals really realized in going through that process that they really needed that background to be the kind of instructional leaders that they wanted to be and to support the early learning piece. The Sobrato academic language model is another example that has a early English learner and dual language learner focus, but they also do it from a systemic process where it is not just giving training to teachers, but making sure that administrators at all levels are engaged in understanding that everyone's going to do this learning and create this change, and that they all have to support each other, otherwise it doesn't happen, because teachers don't really have the power to make that change. They can impact their classroom, but if we're looking for systemic change, we really need everyone to be on board.
So let me do this. I think we should take a couple of questions from all of you, and if they're connected to some of these points that are being raised here about coaching and the importance of principals having some of this child development background, that would be fantastic. I don't know if anyone might have a particular question or story they might want to share from their own experience, to share briefly, of course, about their own experience in that. Or we can just open up to some broader questions as well. Yes? If you can stand up and just be loud and let us know who you are.
It looks like we have a mic coming.
Oh, there's a mic. Excellent.
So good morning. I just want to give the site leader's perspective on this experience. So at the very beginning, I think I actually was in the very first cohort.
Yeah, do you mind just saying your name one more time?
Lynn Rocha Salazar, the principal at AIR. And I was, I believe, in the very first cohort of site principals that attended an institute of learning where, like, I didn't have a site preschool, but it was introduced to us as an initiative that early learning really was until grade 3, right? So it is relevant, and we should be in space together. And so I took advantage of this opportunity that was provided to us. And I clearly did not understand why the students were going out to have early recess in preschool and that it was 45 minutes long, and why would we do that? Right? And so it changed my lens of leadership and how to support and with making connections between the grades. And I think it is critical for us to be side by side with folks. And I just want to say how much I agree and support the comment that you made about it shouldn't happen on Saturdays, because it's happening a lot in our place on Saturdays. And not to be disrespectful, because we know the value of ongoing coaching and support, and we're gonna get at this until we figure out what is best. And I know that in our system, they are incentivized, they are paid, but I worry about the model in that we need to move more toward a job-embedded coaching model that is sustainable. And so I also appreciate the comment that you made about the research indicating that teachers are already teaching curriculum and skills that the students already have. And I just want to highlight that need to emphasize professional development for teachers focused on professional noticing. Right? What is it that the children bring? We always assume because they're brown, black, or poor, or EL, that they're deficit. Right? And so how can we build the capacity of our teachers to notice what they bring to the learning? And so, although we have this strong emphasis, and I'm so glad to hear more about the work, because I don't have preschool, I'm not currently involved in the things that Anna's talking about, but what can we do in areas like math and in literacy to create that vertical articulation that currently does not exist? That is a real issue for us, and there are bright spots. I mean, I think everything that Anna said, I would say, other than that I'm not a big fan of the Saturdays, I agree with everything else, right? That has to be going on in both content areas in a way that is sustainable and builds upon everything that we're learning currently in our system in preschool.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add, one of the main reasons why we decided and we did Saturdays was because, as I mentioned earlier, we have in-home providers, and they are it. They have no subs to call. We have, different agencies that are part of the Starting Smart and Strong initiative. And so, I know a lot of them don't have, 79 subs to go and cover for their classroom. And if we're talking about quality, we need to ensure that the adults that are in those classrooms with their children are familiar faces and not strangers. And so we took all of those little things into consideration, and our teachers are super excited to be there on Saturdays. They actually want more time. Their feedback forms on Saturdays say, we want 4 hours, we want 5 hours, give us more information, because it's really good information. And, like you mentioned, on a Saturday, but I mean, we're just honored and blessed to have these teachers who are eager and willing to give up their Saturdays to learn more about the strategies to support their children in their classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just such a hunger and a passion to absorb more and to help kids. And so that is a really positive piece of that. And if we can get to a place where there are substitutes for in-home care providers so that they can take a little break, that might be a good answer.
Or pay them.
And pay them so that they can actually, on a Saturday, make a little extra money. Another question or comment from the group? Yes, and a microphone will come to you, because I've forgotten we are recording this, so just make sure to say your name and where you're from. And here's your mic.
Hi, my name is Ellen Wheeler, and I'm on the school board in Mountain View Westman School District. We're near Stanford. An issue that's bubbling up in our communities, and I would like some feedback or things that I could say to parents, is the interest in high-quality early learning and all-day childcare. So it's like there's almost two groups of parents who are interested in quality, but then they also want a childcare site that teaches till 6 o'clock at night. So, what do you say to those parents?
Do you all want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'll say one thing. I think that the fact that you're identifying these two groups highlights a fundamental fact about the early learning system in California, but really nationwide, which is that we actually that division starts from the top in terms of how we think about what the purpose of the programs we put in place are. Okay, we have a group of programs that see their fundamental purpose as supporting parental work, which, by the way, is a super important mission. Children need somewhere to be when both of their parents, as is the case for the majority of California families, are working. Then we have this other set of programs that are funded and see their mission as educating young children, as their fundamental mission is to prepare kids for school, to provide early learning opportunities. And I think the thing that I would say, though it's not true yet, is that those do not have to be at odds with one another. In fact, that's just a false dichotomy to say that you can't both support early learning and support parental work. I realize from a school's perspective in particular, the school day is not all day long, but we support parental work for older kids through after-school programs and other means, and so we shouldn't have to bifurcate that, and it shouldn't be a choice of quality in one and not the other.
Yeah, I think your parents are probably not saying quality versus a full day, because they also want quality full day care. They want nurturing, caring people who are engaged with the children and helping them develop their language skills and so on. So it's quality applies to all, but it's that educational component. And because of this fragmented system that we have, it's incredibly complicated for providers or districts to offer different kinds of support for families and children, because they have to go to different funding sources, different sets of accountability and that sort of thing. We could create a more streamlined system in California where a program could be a hybrid, which is it's basically preschool with wraparound childcare, both of high quality, but we make it many programs do that, but they take a whole staff just to fill out all the forms to be able to do it and do all the accountability. So we could make it easier to create those hybrid systems.
The last thing that I'll add is children are learning wherever they are, right? So we can call it whatever we want, but they're still learning. So the best thing that we can do is support all of our early childhood providers to be able to do that. And so I was thinking about in Fresno, I got to go visit a couple of family childcare provider sites. And they are participating in this professional development. And they have women who've been running these programs in their home for 18 years and have talked about how going to this professional development helped them learn to be intentional about the play and instruction, to know that some of the things that they were doing were absolutely intentional and other things they could shift and adjust and make it much more powerful. And they felt proud now more than ever of the work they were doing, and they serve families till way into the evening, working families. They're there for their community, but it's been a very powerful experience for them to just be confident and rooted in what learning looks like, so they can make sure to give that to their kids.
I want to take us now just to, we're just going to do this for about 15, 20 minutes, just to be able to capture a little bit more of the thoughts that are going through all of your heads right now and how these ideas may apply in your district. So really good questions like the one just raised about, okay, so, my parents or my teachers are telling me this, how should I respond? So what I'm going to do is we do want to break into groups. You can stay at your tables. That might be the easiest way to do this. We wanted to give you about 15 minutes to think about 2 questions in the context of your everyday work and what you've also come here to try to change or to improve. So the first question, the broad overarching question is, what is it going to take to scale promising practices such as the coaching in the Fresno Language Project that we've heard, but also the Sobrato Early
Academic
language model. I always just know it as SEAL, but maybe it's that, maybe it's something else that you've heard about over the past couple of days or that was mentioned at the forum last night. What is it going to take to really scale that up or make that real? So we want you to think about this first in terms of what state-level action might need to be taken, since we are at a pretty exciting moment here in California we really have the ears of leadership at the highest levels in California, really wanting new ideas, wanting to make sure they're embedded in new policies. And then secondly, think about and ask yourself, given current resources, what could you implement in your district, in your county, right now, even if there's not a big funnel of new funding arriving right now, not this year, but are there some things you can take back and do right now? So I'm going to time us here. It's about 11:30, so we wanted to go until about 11:45 or so with this, and then we'll come back and we'll ask some more questions of our panel and also do some more sharing out from what you all discussed at your tables. Sound good? Thanks. Okay, everybody, try to finish up your conversations. I hope that there's some nice kind of on-the-ground thinking going on out there. Before I ask about sharing out anything you might want to tell us about what you all were talking about at your table, and any questions you might also have for our panelists, I do want to just call your attention to a couple more things. One is there's an advancement project report that's been out at the front table, uplifting the assets of California's dual language learners in the early years, so which is obviously central to the conversation we've been having today. So just wanted to make sure you knew about that report, and feel free to go pick one up. And then I also just wanted to note that one of the pieces that you have is this one-pager titled 3 Practices and 3 Policies Indispensable for High-Quality Teaching and Learning in Pre-K. If you are at a point where you just need to kind of try to get the attention of someone in your district or your school who is like, I just don't have time, here's kind of a way to have an entree point into that conversation. These are statements that came out of a lot of two years worth of work building consensus across lots of different researchers, and to be able to get to a place where there's just some basic things we can say about what quality practice looks like is really key, and I think will also help the field a lot. So I wanted to mention those, and then also, before we go to share outs, I want to thoroughly embarrass my colleague, Kara Sklar, who I meant to have stand up at the beginning of this. So Kara, will you stand up for a moment? Yes. So Kara, you will see more and more of Kara in the coming months and years. Kara joined us at New America about maybe 6 months ago or so now, and is our deputy director for early and elementary ed, and has a wealth of knowledge both on the ground working in schools, but also at the policy level. So, and Kara has been just integral to all of the work that we've been doing here in planning all this. So go find Kara after this with any questions. Okay, so for those of you who have been pondering these questions about what it's gonna take to scale up some promising practices, who would like to volunteer? Is there anybody who at your table kind of came to a place where you felt like, okay, this is the one thing we're going to have to do. Here's a barrier we have to remove, or here's something I'm going to be able to do when I get back to my district. Have any brave souls that may want to share something out? Yes, and sorry, wait for the microphone that is coming to you.
My name's Debbie Luck. I work with the legislature. I'm in the Assembly Education Committee. And one of the things that we were talking about, it's not necessarily a solution, but one of the challenges is working with legislators, with policymakers who want quick fixes, who want things that sound good in press releases, and providing lots of extra preschool spaces is a good political win. Improving quality in preschool doesn't quite have the same benefit in terms of a policymaker. So what we need, we're struggling with what can we do to convince policymakers that incremental improvements in quality are actually really good for kids. And again, when we're looking at things, we're looking at long-term kind of gains that also don't necessarily work with a policymaker's desire for something that shows results right away. So not necessarily a solution, but an ongoing challenge.
You're dealing with. So let's actually hold that. I think there's many members of our panel who may be able to respond to that. I want just to get a couple of other comments from the floor, and then we'll put those together and discuss them here. Yes.
Hi, I'm Mary Vixie Sandy. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. and have appreciated the opportunity to work with Deborah Stipek for the last several years on this issue of quality. The commission currently issues the permit that allows people to work in subsidized childcare, and it is a very low standard of preparation for this workforce. We are poised, our Commission on Teacher Credentialing meets next week and has on its agenda the potential adoption of new standards for the preparation of this workforce that are rigorous and robust and aligned to the K-12 standards that we have for teachers, and establish a vision that's informed by the National Research Council work, by the work that the Department of Education has been doing for years with frameworks and competencies and all of that. We've attempted to take all of that work and distill it into a set of standards that could be a starting point for really digging in on how we begin to prepare a workforce given all of the factors that impact that workforce, from salaries to working conditions to et cetera. How do we begin to move that workforce into a preparation system that we envisioning here? So we were talking here, and I abused this table with, you know, technical discussions of permitting and credentialing and how we do that. But I think it's really quite important for us to put this stake in the ground right now. We have had for years an early childhood specialist credential on the books. Cal State Fresno is the only university that still has it on their books. I think they've had one graduate in the last 10 years. But we have an opportunity here to revitalize that credential, and we have some standards going to be hopefully adopted or at least moved forward next week that could be the genesis, the driver for that. And then we've got this permit structure and the need to grapple with what's the difference between a preschool teacher and a wraparound care provider, and where do they need to fit on the licensing structure for their permitting work. And these are really important questions that we're right at the beginning of. So there's both opportunity and challenge in that.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, we can get into a little bit more of that as well. Let's take one more. I think I saw, actually, let's do two more. We'll take you and then in yellow second. Is it working? Okay.
I can speak loud. Can you guys all?
Oh, I think we got you now.
Hello? Okay. Hi, I'm Justenia with the Advancement Project. Go Vicky, my colleague up there. Just really quick, going back to the question of what it takes to scale some things like this. I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, but I want to give context from an advocacy organization in always trying to change the narrative and trying to get unlikely allies to really get on to your agenda. And I think here, you know, we talk to our usual suspects and we're all on board, but really what it takes sometimes to get individuals with a different lens. And I would love to pass the mic over to my friend here, because I think her lens is extremely unique, and I hadn't heard anything like that. And she's been talking to her agency from a long time, so she's really happy we're here at this point. But I think her lens was very unique to me personally, and I would love for all of you to hear. And I'm just here encouraging her to share her standpoint. She said that she agreed, by the way. It's not like I'm throwing her under the bus.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to share my lens.
Can you just tell us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Priscilla Chanook, and I am with SEAL, Sobrado Early Academic Language. I'm their CFO. So I've been wearing the finance hat for 20 years and working in nonprofits. So I'm going to share with you my perspective from the financial perspective of shaping dollars. I shared with my colleagues here 3 examples of how I've always been an advocate in terms of early education, having worked with Head Start, Early Head Start for 10 years, of shaping dollars. The first example has to do with reflective of child development dollars from preschool and infant toddler, and how communities, I think the woman asked about full day care and part day care. I had over 9 contracts from the state, and I had federal dollars, I had foundation dollars, and I got very well in braiding all those dollars, but they're challenging. I went up to Sacramento, and they were talking about providing technical assistance and learning how to manage your contracts. And I actually said, let me just stop for a moment and share my perspective. Most organizations don't have the depth of a budget to hire a CFO for themselves. Furthermore, in nonprofits, the turnover is 30%, which is very high in any industry. So by the time you train somebody, they're gone. And what I asked them to do was to simplify. I said, instead of having 9 contracts, could we just simplify it, but make sure it's reflective of community needs? And what I asked for was an infant toddler contract and a pre-K contract. And I said, in La Jolla, they might need part-day care, but I work with immigrant families who need full-day care. I turn away part-day dollars, not because I don't need the money, but it doesn't fit our community need. So lo and behold, after I said that, the next year they did just that. They simplified the contracts. So what I'm trying to say is our voice here in advocacy is to take what we know in terms of our community needs and to voice them. I had experience also with professional development with AB 212 and SF CARES program, and we had money going out to enhance stipends and educational expenses to professionalize a field. And what I realized in looking at the budget was all the money went to the back end of master's holders trying to attain bachelor degrees, but a lot of people who, in my realm, licensed exempt providers, family child care providers, who didn't have their BAs were being left off the funding train. And I said, look what's happening. These providers aren't going to get educated. They're going to go back into their homes and do what they know how they do best for the last 15, 18 years, taking care of kids. So they're going to go back into their homes, and they're going to be cheaper, and our kids are going to go back into their homes, which is counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve here. So I asked them to put money across the board to make sure that our family child care providers, our licensed exempt providers, were not forgotten. So again, I'm taking my perspective of looking at the dollars from a budgetary perspective and voicing them. Because I really believe it is not their money, it is not our money, but community money. And we have to voice what we see happening and shaping those dollars to meet needs. So thank you. I just wanted to share some examples of how I look at this work.
Excellent, thank you. And then just real quickly here to you over there. Sorry, in the beautiful yellow sweater.
Is it working? There we go. Sorry, I know we don't have much time. I'm Patty Shutter. I'm from the UC Davis Mind Institute, and I didn't hear anything about preparation or programs or practices to prepare the early childhood providers to work with students with disabilities. And I just wanted to make sure that that's part of the conversation always. And that a lot of the promising practices that have been identified with developing the skills and preparing the next generation of providers to work with English language learners are also really effective for students with disabilities. And that coaching model is really key.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to quickly, we've got 5 minutes to just capture a little bit of your reflections, panelists, and then we'll have to close out. But we have the point that for politicians, it's hard to just focus on quality when expanding slots is a little sexier. We have the point that there's a really important credentialing proposal underway right now, and what can we do with that, and how can we move that forward. The recognition that from a funding perspective, there are lots of different funding streams, and to understand, and I may not be fully generalizing this correctly, but that simplifying and also recognizing how to ensure funding goes across different settings will be an important part of advocacy. And then this recognition of children with special needs and disabilities, and that they're kind of a key part of understanding what quality looks like in the classroom. So, what are some thoughts that have come up for all of you, and then we'll close out. And yeah, go ahead, Beth.
I would love to, I'm going to take on that first question, because I think it is so important, and it's true, and we have to work within the realm that we exist in, this reality. So I think that what I would say about expansion of slots, and it being, if you say sexier than investing in quality, is that we really are at a point in California with preschool where we don't have the infrastructure, also not a terribly jazzy thing to talk about, but we don't have the infrastructure to support expansion. It's critically important that we expand, because we're not serving kids, and we have parents who need to work, and we need to make sure that children are having those early learning opportunities. We don't have the workforce. And when we know that workforce is the key to quality, why, if we need to invest in the workforce, why wouldn't we invest in a high quality workforce, right? Because that is how we're going to get the benefits. So when policymakers invest in a program but don't really take a laser focus on the quality of that program, they're going to be disappointed, because they're not going to see the benefits that they're expecting, that they hear in the news.
I want to add to that. There are state pre-Ks in California where the slots sit empty for two reasons. One is they can't find the staff, and two, it doesn't work for families because it's half day. So until we address those issues, why increase the number of empty slots? That doesn't really, I don't know where the political capital comes from. The other thing is to look at other states. Other states are so far ahead of us on quality. Just visit any other state at their pre-K, and I think perhaps it would be pride that we could work on for with some of our legislators, that it's just embarrassing and also not going to be effective in achieving any of their goals. So I understand the politics of it, but I think there are some pretty compelling reasons why the quality has to be addressed.
I'll just add that, what do my notes say? I'll just add that one of the things that we need to help legislators do is see what's working. So the research and the case studies that are happening, being able to build models like what we see in Fresno, like what SEAL offers, are incredibly important because they've already done a lot of legwork to start showing the critical parts of quality that are making a difference and how it does take time. And so when we can take them to go visit these sites and take them to see what it really looks like and what it really takes, that will really help inform what we give them on paper so they can see it for themselves. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how to build these models and how to support districts. You know, we have state dollars right now to help with some of the dual language learner approaches in California because we need to build seed money so we can launch these great ideas. So that's one thing. So how do we just elevate the things that are working? The other thing is that a lot of what we're raising, a lot of us would agree these are important, but until we get these things codified in policy, like what is required in licensing, like what's required for the quality rating and improvement system, the things that people respond to, it's going to be something nice to do. I talked to a professor at a university who runs the teacher training program, and we agreed on the things that should be a part of that training program. And I said, what would it take for you to modify what you're doing in higher ed? She says, it needs to be required so we can respond to it. So,
Excellent. No,
And
be the
I-
last word,
yes.
since we're going to have to close up.
One thing that I did want to add was we're talking about the scaling and the sustainability. Fresno received a grant to offer high-quality professional development for early educators of dual language learners for infant and toddler and preschool early care settings. And so with these two grants are going to focus on scaling 2 cohorts in the Central Valley. And then for the sustainability is we are developing resources to be disseminated for a Trainer of Trainer Institute so that it can keep going and it's just not the 10 years that we have the grant for. So it's growing.
Excellent. So obviously a lot of challenges still, but some real bright spots and some opportunities. And for all of you in this room, is content to take this as your charge to make this happen wherever you are. So I just want to say a big thanks to our panel. Join me in a round of applause for them. And thanks. I guess we'll break now.